AI is an automatic machine gun.
Right.
And we're giving it to children.
That's a pretty negative view.
I learned about the history of AI. It is littered with overpromising and under-delivering. Back then it was nerdy. You could beat up for being a computer scientist. So I eventually switched to computer science. And a professor...
Did you get beat up?
I hid out in the computer lab. You are a bear. You are a monster. Like, we were terrified of you. Apparently, I threw a monitor across the room once when we had some problem that was my fault. They said, we are not here to help America. We're here to make money. And basically, we were just an investment club using our brains to make money for a small group of rich white people. When we started working there, like, a great day was making $20 million in a day. I was so unhappy, and the only thing that made me happy was success.
Welcome back to another episode of Invested, and I'm thrilled to be here with David Magerman. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So, for those who don't know, David was a partner at Renaissance Technologies, sorry, for many, many years. Tell us a story, first of yourself and then Renaissance.
Myself, I grew up in South Miami, kind of poor part of town. My father was a taxi driver. My mother was a secretary. They didn't go to college. And, I was raised on this religion of achievement, like academic achievement, be successful. That's the way to get ahead. And did pretty well. Went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania for college, Stanford for my PhD, studied computer science. I was building language models in the 1980s and early 90s before people knew what they were.
We're going to talk more about that.
Yeah. Sure. And then realized that we were too early. That I was working at IBM, a group there, the speech recognition group that was focused on building language models for machine translation and speech. And we were just too early. It took like weeks and weeks on hundreds of computers to train our models. So a bunch of us realized that there were better things to do with our time, and I followed some of my colleagues to Renaissance Technologies, quantitative hedge fund run by Jim Simons, famous mathematician, and really got them going with equities trading. They were a commodities and a currencies shop that was capped out at like $500 million, and they didn't know how to trade equities. And my bosses, Peter Brown and Bob Mercer, helped them take the system they had, which wasn't working, and with my programming help and my system design help, made it into something that did work. And we went from managing $500 million to managing $10 billion within 10 years. And by the time I was running equities trading, it was making 3/4 of the company's money.
Why did anyone think that what you did at the time was relevant to equities trading? We need to explain that to people.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So Jim Simons had this idea that math was what mattered. And math means using data and using formulas and building predictive models that were mathematically correct. And it didn't matter what you were modeling. So we had particle physicists, we had astrophysicists, we had biologists, we had applied mathematicians. We eventually had statisticians, although initially we didn't have those. And these brilliant people, smarter than me, far smarter than me, were brilliant at each of their fields, and they each brought a unique perspective to modeling something. And if you studied finance or you studied financial markets or economics, you were going to be in the groupthink of everyone who for the last few hundred years studied capitalism. Jim didn't want that. He wanted unique perspectives that no one else was going to have thought of how to do things, so you could find new things that no one else was looking at, so you could carve out signals in the markets that could make us money for a long time. And when we got there, Peter, Bob, and I, what they didn't have was computer scientists. So they were writing code in COBOL, and they were writing code in C, in broken C code, and they really didn't have an idea how to build a big system. So they could trade a few commodities, they could trade a few currencies. But when you're talking about trading thousands of stocks, the computer science complexity of that, the architecture you need for that is very different. And so they were struggling to make that work. And I understood language, which was irrelevant at the time. And I understood some information theory, which they taught me a lot more. But really what I understood how to do was to build robust software that could run programs for weeks on end without crashing, and eventually we could use that as the basis for our trading systems.
Was there nothing in your understanding of language that mattered to this?
Never.
Never.
And I shouldn't. I should be careful what I say because I have to be cognizant of my, restrictions of what I, revealing secrets. But they didn't bring people when they hired Peter Brown and Bob Mercer and me and a couple of other people from the IBM speech group. Probably about 10 or 12 of us came in the fullness of time. People assumed we were doing natural language understanding. We were doing speech recognition, listening to recordings of, CEOs speaking. It really was just our ability to do science. We needed PhDs, not because they had the degree, because if you finished a PhD, you were a closer. You could accomplish something. If you were a brilliant person who was all but dissertation, if you completed all your requirements of your PhD except for finishing your thesis, you were the opposite of what we wanted. You weren't a closer. You could get a project 98% of the way there, but you couldn't finish it. We needed people who could understand deep science, deep mathematics, and solve real problems in those fields, but could also finish a project and write about it and defend it.
That's super interesting. What motivated you? So here you are in the IBM lab working on NLP, what we call now, I guess, NLP. And you get a call to go to what we now would call a quant trading firm. Why do you do that?
I didn't. I said no.
You said no.
The first time they interviewed me, I just started a job in a research lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was excited about building a big research group and conquering natural language. And I was doing well. And Peter called me up and said, "Hey, come out here and interview." So I, drove through Connecticut and, crossed the ferry and went to Long Island and interviewed, and they offered me a job. And I said, I would love to do it. It sounds really interesting, but I just moved out to Cambridge. They paid $7,000 to move me. I felt like that was like a fortune. And like I couldn't, I felt like that was such an investment in me. I couldn't renege on the promise to do the work. And so I said, I would love to do it, but I really want to, stay with my commitment at the company I was at. And Peter said to me at the time, "You're going to realize this is the dumbest thing you ever did." And then 6 months later, when the two really great scientists we tried to hire went to better labs and didn't want to come to work with us, I realized I was not going to be able to put together, me with my fresh PhD was not going to be able to put together a world-class lab in my little company in the corner of Cambridge. And I called them back up and I said, "Is the job still available?" And they played with me. They were going to hire me no matter what. But they said, "I don't know. We've got other people interviewing. We have to talk to somebody. Why don't you come in again? And then we'll decide, at the end of the week what we think of you." And they were just toying with me. They wanted to hire me and they offered me the job. And actually is a blessing because the first job they were offering me was going to be in California, working in the production group. With the production was done by a different manager in California.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And in between the time that I said no and the time I said yes, they had moved the production group from California to New York, and the guy who ran it had quit. So they allowed me to come to Long Island, which I was still doing production, but I got to be in the room with all the scientists, all the researchers. And so even though my job was to write software for production, I had my fingers in everything. I was learning the whole system, finding out how everything worked, and really trying to be a nuisance in everyone's business, trying to learn how the Renaissance models worked.
Did you realize what you were getting into, like that this was going to become what ended up being known as Renaissance, probably the most successful hedge fund of all time? Or were you just kind of going to do
my
computer science?
my whole career, I've just kind of floated. When I went to Penn, I was just studying computer science. Actually, I started out as a political science major in the college and then switched to religious studies. Even though everyone knew that I was a computer scientist. I just was, back then it was nerdy. So it was like you could beat up for being a computer scientist. So I eventually switched to computer science, and a professor.
Did you get beat up?
In middle school a bit.
Uh-huh.
I hid it, and I hid out in the computer lab. We had TRS-80s, with 4 kilobytes of RAM, and I wrote little games on the TRS-80 back in middle school.
I don't think you're that much older than me, but there were already like Apple IIs in mine, and I had a Commodore 64, TRS-80.
So I'm 57.
Okay, 3 years before. Okay.
So it's like in the late 70s, I went to a gifted elementary school program where they did things like taught you bridge as a class, and they actually had a stock market class, which I cheated on to do well. In terms of if you pick the stocks at the end of the program
Yeah.
and just fill in the data backfilling, you do really well. Don't tell my teachers, they're going to flunk me out.
That's the opposite of front running the market.
Right, exactly. But one of the things they offered was computer science. You could learn to program, and so my mother was taking whatever 10-year-old me to the local community college to sit in front of a terminal and write basic programs as part of my curriculum in elementary school. And so I learned to program. They eventually scrimped and saved and bought me a computer. Where back then the disk drives were a cassette tape.
Yep.
And you recorded the programs on the cassette tape in audio, kind of like war games. They have like the signals in audio, and you had to
for the young people listening, War Games was a movie.
Oh, sorry, yeah,
yeah. War Games is a movie. It's actually a great movie with Matthew Broderick, I think.
And Ali Sheedy.
Ali Sheedy,
early crush.
And it's actually a worthwhile movie even to watch today.
For sure, I don't think
I've watched it in 40 years.
In the last 2 years, I probably watched it.
Oh, yeah.
But so when you recorded your programs, you had to remember to print them out also, because eventually, if you recorded things over and over again, eventually the tape went bad, and then you had to type it in again. So limited the progress, but I'm 10, 11 years old, so I'm not really ambitious about what I'm writing. Anyway, that was my introduction to computer programming. But anyway, getting back to Renaissance, wait, what was
What I was asking was, did you really understand what you were getting into?
Right.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, I really, I was telling the story, like, so when I was at Penn, I was just in a computer science class, and the professor saw something in me and said, "Do you want to do research as an undergraduate?" Like, and he befriended me, and he said, "Pick a lab, and I'll make an introduction." He probably wanted me to pick his lab, but I didn't. I picked Mitch Marcus's lab doing natural language. And then I wrote my thesis, got published, my undergraduate thesis. And when I gave the talk, someone at IBM Research saw it and said, "I can't have someone outside of IBM doing this kind of work. We own the market on this work." And so he offered me a summer job, and that turned into my thesis research position. And then I ended up at Renaissance, and I was just going to work for a few years, make a few $1 million, go back to academia, and hopefully become a professor, become a successful professor. I was trying to get a job at Johns Hopkins, maybe back at Penn. And I was there just having fun. I worked in the lab. I slept in the lab. I had a sleeping bag next to my computer. And I just wanted to work hard, learn, do really well, and then go back to my academic research. But you never leave. It's such
Why?
because it's like working in a grad school with really, really good snack bar. It's like they
Sounds like Google.
It's a lot like what Google. It was Google before Google.
Yeah.
The kitchen grew and grew. They eventually built an enclosed sports facility so people wouldn't leave campus to play sports. Everyone lived in really nice houses within a mile or two of the office. They really wanted everyone just to stay and work, and I loved it. It was like a really collegial environment. We fought, we argued, we discussed, we shared ideas, and it was like we were solving completely worthless problems. I mean, we were doing absolutely nothing for humanity, but it was hard. It was competitive. We knew the world was trying to beat us, and we were beating them, and we just wanted to stay ahead. So it was just a fun game to play every day, try to outscore everybody where the score was, millions of dollars. And I was with, like I said, people much smarter than me. I learned so much from the people around me, and they thought I was smarter than them because I could write software better than them. They could think of ideas I could never think of, but I could build the things they thought of, and they couldn't.
It sounds like when you say, "I thought you'd live for a few years, make a few $1 million," you knew what you were getting into there, that this was a juggernaut of a fund.
No. I mean, what I thought I could make in 3 or 4 years, I could make in 2 months. As things got underway.
You understood this?
No, none of us understood this. No, when we started working there, a good day, like a great day, was making $20 million in a day.
Yeah.
We had this policy where if you made $20 million in a day, they'd buy you lunch the next day, and we had champagne at 4:00. And if you lost $20 million a day, they'd do a random number generator, and one of the employees would have to buy everyone lunch. That was the game we played. But $20 million was like a lot of money to make. By the end of my time there in the mid 2005, 2006, $100 million, $150 million was a good day. So like the scale of it, we never thought that the capacity of the markets was that big, because when you couldn't do it in equities, equities had so much more capacity than currencies and commodities,
Mhm.
and they were also at the time less aggressively traded.
Right.
We
And I think conceived of as being less mathematical at the time, right? It was more fundamental research. Commodities
Right.
and currencies tend to have more, let's call it, mathematical bent than
Yeah,
equities.
and there was this whole efficient market
Right.
hypothesis that said that you couldn't. I mean, people told Jim what you're trying to do is impossible. You will guaranteed fail. Like mathematically, you'll fail, and we obviously proved them wrong.
And what's your takeaway from that? There must be like a deep takeaway from the fact that here comes Jim Simons and he says, "Okay, I'm going to use math for this," and it conflicts with the efficient market hypothesis, which I think has been proven wrong in many ways. But
Right.
that's daunting on some level.
Yeah, I mean, what it proves is that and Renaissance was very much a startup.
Yeah.
When I got there, even though it was managing $500 million, it was 20-somewhat people, and we were in the early days of a field. What it showed me is that you have to have conviction. You have to know what your edge is, and then you just have to have maniacal conviction. And when something goes wrong that doesn't break your confidence in your thesis, you just have to figure out what's wrong and fix it. And there were a number of times where we had losing streaks and things weren't working right. And Jim just said, "Is the math right? If the math is right, it's bad luck. But if it's not bad luck, the math isn't right." And more often than not, the math wasn't right. We had either a bug or some assumption we were making mathematically that was crude and inaccurate. And sometimes we had bad luck. The NASDAQ crash was pretty tough on us.
Yeah.
Certain big market moves were, although the recovery from it was amazing for us.
Right.
The big moves, we lose a lot on the move and we make a lot on the
Snapback,
chaos of the recovery.
Did you have the conviction that Jim had?
More naively, because he knew like a million times more math than I did. But I believed that whatever I did was going to work eventually. And if something was going wrong, it was my fault and I had to fix it.
Where'd that come from?
I mean, my childhood, growing up lower middle class, growing up, they didn't talk about it then, but I was probably like on the spectrum in that, like, I had no social skills. I didn't understand people, and I was like a real loner. And I just needed, I was so unhappy. And the only thing that made me happy was success. Accolades, being given a math prize or a science prize or winning a Latin competition. And so, yeah, I studied Latin when I was in middle school. It's a great place to meet girls. Not a lot of guys go to these things. But it was really, I learned that to be happy, I had to be successful. And so I just had to, like, when it wasn't working, I had to figure out how to fix it. And you get a lot of pats on the backs for fixing things that seem like they shouldn't work. So when you solve a problem that other people think can't be solved, they give you a good pat on the back. And that pat on the back would get me 2 weeks.
2 weeks. That's
2 weeks.
Huh?
2 weeks of happiness, and then got to go back and make another hit.
That must have been difficult to be around if you're only happy for 2 weeks.
Oh, no one liked me. No, I actually thought I thought I was loved. The secretaries loved me because I was polite. But I when I left Renaissance in 2006, and my team, a group that I managed that took me, they had like a party, a dinner, and that was when they gave me like little gag prizes. And I won't repeat all the things that they had on them, but basically the theme was, "You are a bear. You are a monster. Like, we were terrified of you." Apparently I didn't remember doing this, but I'm sure I did. Apparently I threw a monitor across the room once when we had some problem that was my fault. Like, I wasn't mad at anybody else, but if my group did something wrong, it was my fault. And I once threw a monitor across the room in rage over what had happened. And I thought of myself as a little teddy bear. Like, I didn't know. Little old me. I'm like a little, I was the shortest guy in the company probably. And I didn't think I was that scary, but I was terrifying, apparently.
Is that a lack of self-awareness?
Oh yeah. So I did something that I think every manager should have the opportunity to do. I quit Renaissance in 2006, 2008, moved to Philadelphia, and then when my non-compete ran out, I was like bored because I needed to work, and I decided I could get my interview suit on and go and interview on different firms because I was free to work anywhere. Or I could put my jeans on and go back to Renaissance and say, hey guys, would you mind if I worked from Philly full time and just, wrote code, found signals, did research. And they said, great. And they paid me what I wanted to be paid. And, but they said, the only rule is I said, the only rule is I want to make this amount of money and I never have to come into the office. They said, we'll pay you this amount of money. The only rule is you can never come into the office. Because as much as I didn't like them, they didn't like me. And it was great. I worked remotely. I didn't answer the phone. I responded to emails, a few people I spoke to, and I was pretty productive. But it was definitely like, but one thing that happened was because I came in as a researcher, effectively a junior researcher, I was now working lower in the management chain from people who used to report directly to me. And the vindictiveness of the people trying to undermine my ability to get anything done, any chance they had to stop me from productivity, to cut off, to reject my work, reject the code that I wanted to put in. It proved to me how nasty I must have been to have created that much enmity, that much anger. And it taught me a lesson that even though we accomplished so much, it wasn't worth it. I could have accomplished 97% of what I accomplished and been a much nicer guy. And, seeing how being a harsh taskmaster leads to such long-term. I mean, this was like 10 years later. People were still, giving me a hard time, and nothing I could do would really change their bitterness toward me. And it really left me at the very end when I eventually got fired from Renaissance for saying some things that I can't talk about now. I was under attack from every angle. I was at war, and I was in a horrible mental space. And the people that I'd spent my entire adult life working with, 25 years, including IBM.
These people stayed there a long time also.
Yeah. Everyone stayed. These are the only friends I had. It turned out I had no friends. Not a single person called me up to say, we can't talk about shop, but how are you doing? How's your family? How are you handling it? Not a single person. And that taught me something that I'd started to learn because I'd started becoming, religious. I'd started studying Torah, but I realized that at first I was mad at them, that they had wronged me by not being there for me. And then I realized, no, I didn't do what I needed to do as a person to make friends. I was a colleague. I created symbiotic relationships with my coworkers, and they loved that. But the moment I wasn't relevant to them financially, professionally, I didn't exist as a person, and that was on me. And I realized that if I want to have relationships, it's a two-way street. I've got to care about their families. I got to care about their well-being. I got to push for the success of people that work for me, even if that means they're not working for me anymore. If they graduate to a better position. And I needed to really evaluate how I looked at the humanity of the business world that I was in.
Was there a specific moment that kind of dawned on you?
I mean, it was when I was in the trenches of this fight for my financial life against my former employer, as I was threatening them, they were threatening me. They were trying to claw back every dollar they'd ever paid me because I forgot to fill out some compliance form in 2002. And I called up one of my longtime friends just to see, just to check in, how's your kids, how are your kids doing? And he wouldn't take my call. And this is someone that I'd seen him before he knew his wife. He certainly, saw my kids grow up. And it was just really very telling that the people that I thought were in my life were just ornaments. And I was just an ornament to them.
Do you think it's like that across funds in Wall Street, or is it unique to you or to Renaissance? Or
I think it's like it's the human condition. There are people who are driven, and raising my kids, I definitely let them know the feelings I have about this, so they can choose for themselves how much they want to maniacally succeed and achieve, and how much they want to have a community in life, and let them choose for themselves. Because it's not like I say I deeply regret everything I did.
Yeah.
I just wish I'd known the consequences of it, which was having no relationships as a, 40-something-year-old guy, and having to start then and build a community. But I just think that it's something that is just a part of humanity. And this is where like we're studying Torah, especially studying Hasidus and Tanya, helps me to understand that um, Jews are more than just apes with language. Like we're I mean we have a godly soul, we have a purpose in the world, and we have a purpose for each other. That we collectively are a soul. We all have a piece of God, and that your piece of God, my piece of God are roughly the same. And I have to care about you as much as I care about myself. And that's not just words. It's not just showing up for a minion. That's like in all aspects of it. And I think realizing the connectedness of the Jewish people has helped me understand that I have to look at the human beings in my life and view them as not just like my brother or my friend, but as myself.
That's amazing, actually. You said before that you thought at some point that what you had done for all these years was worthless. What do you mean by that?
Um, when 9/11 happened,
Yeah.
it was a huge event. I mean, there were people on our trading desk who had phone lines directly to people who weren't there the next day.
Wow.
And it was really very emotional what was going on. And I thought, we have the most brilliant minds in our company. We had, probably at that point, like 30 or 40 PhDs who had deep knowledge of cybersecurity and coding theory and information theory. And I said, why don't we take some of our team and take a break and offer our services to the NSA, to the CIA, to like help build better systems for detecting these kinds of attacks being communicated. And they laughed me out of the room. They said, we are not here to help America. If you want to do that in your spare time, go to it. We're here to make money. We're here to make money for our investors, and eventually we were just there to make money for ourselves because we kicked our investors out of the money-making parts of the company. We still offered them parts that didn't make money to other people, but the parts that made money, we kept for ourselves. And basically, we were just an investment club of people using our brains to make money for a small group of rich white people. And given the capacity that we had for solving problems, in the end, it was a huge waste of the teachers collectively that taught all of us how we did what we did would be collectively rolling over in their graves to know that all of their effort to teach us led to just money.
If you had it back, what would you do with those years?
So people ask me this question. I think that...
Oh, I'm not the first one to ask you this question?
No,
all right, take it back.
No, because I speak to student groups. I speak to young adults, professionals. And I can't say I would change anything because if I didn't make the mistakes I made, I wouldn't know what I know today.
Yeah.
And I feel so much more empowered to do things today because of all the mistakes I've made. And I think what's going on now, especially today, this year, these years, is so important and so critical that I'm glad I made the mistakes then when less was at stake, and now I can use the collective wisdom that I've gained from all my mistakes to do the right thing.
Life's a journey.
Life is a journey.
Speaking of the journey, I actually want to kind of contrast two things. One of our crack team mentioned that you sold candy.
Wow, where'd they find that?
At some point.
That's great, yeah.
Was that like in high school?
Yeah. So, I mean, you remember in high school, the clubs to raise money would sell candy bars. That was one of the things.
Yeah, in elementary school, we had that.
We had it in high school,
Yeah.
and like the club to raise money for prom, to raise money for sporting events. The sports teams would do it. They would sell, lemonade. They would sell, but they would sell candy bars. And I figured out that, that if you went to the local pharmacy, they sold candy bars for like 17 cents a bar, and you got 50 cents a bar at school. So
you bought retail and sold super retail.
Right. Well, and what happened was, the clubs would buy Snickers bars.
Yeah.
So if you were like, doing it for the track team, everyone was selling Snickers bars. So I had a menu. I had 15 different kinds of candy. I still to this day have the spreadsheets that I had daily graphs of how many of each bar that I sold. And I knew that like the Twix bars were not selling well, but the Milky Way was a hot item. So I'd stock up on the Milky Way, and I'd fewer Twixes, and I knew certain classrooms, certain teachers knew I was coming around, so they would like come next door to my classroom when I was there and buy some candy for me, and made sure I had what they wanted, give them their fix. And it was all going really well until this Russian kid who was much more sophisticated than I was, he had people working for him. He would sit in the parking lot in the morning.
He was the Tupperware guy.
He,
And you were like a solo.
yeah,
yeah.
And he had like, he had guys in the parking lot. They would open the back of his trunk and pull out like, bags of candy to give out to his sellers, and they would go in different parts. It was a big school, like there were like 3,000 kids in the school, and they would cover the market. And when he found that I was doing it, he came to me with one of his goons and said, "You should work for me. You should work for me." And I said, "No, I'm happy just doing what I'm doing." And so he was not very polite about it, and I felt a little threatened.
Is that why you decided to stop being an entrepreneur and start being an investor?
No, but before he had a chance to really do damage to me, he got caught. And he said he worked for me. And because I was that guy in high school that I was the rest of the time, they believed him. And they were happy to like punish me. So they suspended me. And I learned a lot about recidivism because in indoor suspension, I was in indoor suspension for...
Most people don't know what recidivism is. Recidivism is the propensity of somebody who, for example, you put in jail to go back to being a criminal.
Right.
Yeah.
So in indoor suspension for 3 days, I got off one day for good behavior, so I did 2 days. There was this really cute girl with dyed hair in front of me who effectively offered me to be part of a drug ring. She wanted me to like ride my bicycle to like into Miami and sell cocaine. I didn't consider it. She was cute, but not that cute. But it just goes to show because they knew I was caught for selling illegally. They didn't know I was selling candy. So they thought I was like a prime candidate.
Sure,
I said, I'm sorry, I don't drive. They said, that's great. You ride a bicycle. That'll be perfect cover. No one will ever suspect. I said no.
Candy.
Yeah, candy.
That kind of candy.
Yeah.
Because the other thing we turned up is that after some trip to Israel when you were much younger, 10 weeks I think you spent to Israel, you at the time wanted to become religious, but you didn't because your mom deprogrammed you or something like that.
Right. She yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I mean, like
because she didn't save you from going to sell candy or getting beat up.
My father would drive me to the drugstore for that. Immigrants' lives are hard, and my grandparents came over. And were different levels of religious, and my grandfather was Orthodox, Torah observant, and my mother grew up feeling like his orthodoxy destroyed their family. And there's a lot of water under the bridge there, but basically she had this image that being an Orthodox Jew was stifling. It was a cult, and that it made no sense, and that if I got too deeply immersed in it, I would get swallowed up by it and never come out, and it would ruin my life. So she made a very big point of telling me that she had nightmares. I was frozen in a freezer, that I was in a block of ice, that it was going to ruin me. And I love my mother, and I respected my mother, and it meant it was meaningful to me that she was objecting to it, and it eventually succeeded in pulling me away from it. I mean, I wasn't wearing a black hat at that point. I was still in the very early stages, but she succeeded in pulling me away from it at that time.
How old were you then?
I was a senior in high school. So
senior in high school.
Like
and where'd you come in Israel for those 10 weeks?
Alexander Muss High School in Israel. Early days. I was in a public school, I was the first group from that public school to get permission to do the program.
What's one thing you took away from those 10 weeks in Israel?
I mean, God spoke to me when I was there. God, the first time I stood on Mount Scopus and I saw Jerusalem, God spoke to me and told me that I should keep the mitzvot, that I should learn and keep Torah, and that I was a good person, but that I needed to be a good Jew, and that meant keeping the mitzvot. And it really taught me, and the program itself and the Rebbeim that I met there, the teachers, some of them were rabbis, some of them weren't, was just the holiness of the land. That the time I was in Israel, I was a different person. It activated a part of me that got watered down and eaten away, and eventually covered over by the time I got back to when I got back to America. What was exposed in Israel, the spirituality, the connection to God, was eventually covered over and stifled.
When you finished at Renaissance in Long Island, why'd you move to Philadelphia and not to Israel? I get the Liberty Bell, and it's got a verse from the Bible on it, but
no, it had nothing to do with that. It was really I had a standing offer from the dean of the engineering school, who I'd been friendly with
at Penn.
And I was on the board of overseers of the school, that I could come and teach there if I wanted to. But I wanted to be close to New York. My wife's a New Yorker. I like New York, but I felt trapped on Long Island. So I needed to find a place that was within reasonable commuting distance of New York, but was kind of inland enough that I could escape. If there's ever like a hurricane, a disaster, God forbid terrorism, I could just go west and not have to like get on a boat. Because if you get on the highway in Long Island, if you've ever been on the LIE,
I have been.
if everyone's going to something in New York, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And don't the public transportation is not like what it is in Israel.
Don't take the jitney. What's called the jitney?
The jitney, yeah.
Yeah. Don't take the jitney. You're not going to get there.
Yeah.
Very quickly. And so later in your life, you kind of come back to religion, which I guess has not ruined your life.
No, it's thank God I found a connection to Judaism, to Torah, to God, and it really was actually a cousin. I have a cousin who lives in Harnof. I just visited him.
It's an area in Jerusalem.
Yeah, and I just visited him before this meeting. We're very close. At the time, I actually wasn't speaking to him, but he didn't know that because he was a Haredi guy, so he didn't know.
Ultra Orthodox, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't know he didn't know I wasn't talking to him because it didn't really matter. But he invited his whole extended family to come to Israel for his oldest son's bar mitzvah, and it was like a 12-day trip. And I said to my wife, we had two young boys, and she was pregnant with our third, and I said, trip to Israel. Let's go. What the heck? And I saw, he had this large family and an even larger community. He was very much like the mayor of the town, very, very central. And I was there for meals, for lunches and dinners. And every day was this group of loving people who loved each other, who loved Torah, 10-year-olds who were like answering Torah questions. And I thought it was just such a beautiful lifestyle that I was really missing. And I thought, how can I really felt like the dumbest guy in the room because these like 10-year-olds knew like Torah that I didn't know. And not that I was expecting to know Torah, but I didn't expect to like have these kids knowing so much more than me about my tradition, my culture, my history. And a friend of my cousin saw me and asked me what I was upset about. I told him, and he said, when you go back to America, there's a program called Partners in Torah. You call them up, they match you up with a partner, and you can learn for an hour a week on the phone anything you want about Torah. And so I did that. I started that out, and it was a gradual path over the course of 7 years. I couldn't tell you when I became a Torah observant. Sometime during that 7-year period, from learning things that I wasn't doing, to sort of trying it a little on for size, to then pretending I was Orthodox and seeing what would happen if I tried doing some of these things, to eventually just realizing I believed it, that Torah was true, and that my life was meant to be lived within the bounds of Torah.
For a guy who's like an achiever and wants, the pat on the back, you achieved something, this feels like a pretty frustrating pathway to kind of do this, right? It's starting at the bottom again on some level in your own personal life, to kind of start Torah where you say a 10-year-old knows more than more than you do. How did that feel?
Well, you've never met a Kiruv rabbi then.
Well, yes.
Because Kiruv rabbis give you, like, you say, like, you pronounce, like, a Hebrew word almost correctly, and, like, you've just, gotten a Nobel Prize. Like, the Kiruv rabbis are really good at making you feel really good for doing simple things. So, no, I definitely got a lot of emotional support from the Rebbeim for doing simple things. And then eventually, I convinced them, stop pandering to me. Like, challenge me. Make me do something really good before you give me any kind of
Was
praise.
there any dissonance? Like, you had this super successful business career and engineering career and software career, and you figured out like immensely good hard problems, and at the same time you're kind of finding a new world here that, a priori you said, make you feel really good for doing simple things?
It's just two parts of your brain. It was like two parts of my life. I really compartmentalized the time I was sitting down writing code, and then the times that I was learning Torah, studying with a chavrusa, and then eventually when I was, actually practicing and davening and studying on my own, it was just two parts of my life, and they really were independent.
I want to go back to language for a second. So you did NLP before NLP was a thing. You said built language models before we knew what an LLM was, a large language model today. How do you think about the journey from the 80s when you started in this area to where we are today? And where do you actually think we are today?
It's a great question. And I think that I look at all the different aspects of my careers, starting with my even my candy business, but all the things that I've done really are like meeting together at an intersection of what's going on in the world today, and all of my different learnings are really relevant. And the one thing that when I was studying for my PhD thesis, for my PhD, and you have to study the history of the field, I learned about the history of AI and computer science, and it is littered with overpromising and underdelivering. Going back to Eliza, the chatbot in the 60s, where people thought, wow, this is like an intelligent agent. This is like artificial. This is real AGI. You can talk to it and it'll give you counseling advice. And it was not that. And people eventually realized the demo was just canned, and it was just a toy. And all through the years, even the research I did when I had these great results, when I look back on them, I was a horrible scientist. My testing methodology was horrible. I probably wrote papers that had inaccurate results in them. When there's no money on the line, you're just trying to get a paper published. I was never intending to do anything dishonest, but you just didn't have the same rigor when you're doing research. And I think a lot of the results that you show, when you're not really solving a real world problem, you're just solving a toy problem, or you're solving you're doing a demo, you could get away with a lot. And I think that back then there was a movement away from rules and moving towards data-driven analysis of things. But there was before the internet. We had 1 million words of data. I mean, think about that. The amount of data these large language models are trained on.
Yeah.
We had a corpus of 1 million words, and that was wow, they're using 1 million words. How are they managing that? That's a lot of data. So there were a lot of things that didn't work because we didn't have enough data.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have enough computing power. But the basic ideas of what we were trying to do are very similar to what we're doing today. The biggest similarity is the fraudulence of the demos. That
Interesting point.
My understanding was that OpenAI spent a year canvassing what are the 100 most common things people are going to try to do with large language models once we have them out. And they made sure those 100 things worked well in a demo. But those 100 things, writing Shakespearean sonnets, not really very practical. Not a lot of business use case for that. And so while it was amazing that you could see, I could write a financial essay in iambic pentameter, that's lovely, but that's never going to be something you're going to be wanting to do. And so, but people assume, wow, if it can do that, imagine all the other amazing things it can do. Well, it can't. It was engineered to be able to do those 100 things really well. And now we're seeing, as you're deploying it, it was overpromised and under-delivering. And so I think that the experience, if you think AI started in 2021, you're going to have one perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you think AI started in 2013, when deep learning really hit its stride, you're going to think another thing. But if you realize that AI started in the 40s and was a subject of science fiction before it was any kind of reality, and that there's been almost closing in on 100 years of thought about AI, if you look at it from that historical perspective, you realize we're nowhere near where people say we are. We are in a bubble. The bubble's going to burst, and there's maybe 5% of the use cases that are being promoted as being a solved problem by generative AI will turn out to be really valuable. This is a generational accomplishment. The transformer models are like a once-in-a-generation advancement that is amazing. But when you take that and promise AGI and don't deliver it, there'll be a lot of dissatisfied customers. And I think that's the big mistake we're making now. The one big mistake we're making now is that we're wildly overpromising and we're going to disappoint. The other mistake we're making is that we've taken science out of the researchers' hands and put it in the drugstores
What does that mean?
a decade before it's ready. Imagine if you took biological weapons, but instead of using them in level 5 containment environments, you just put them in CVS
Mm-hmm.
and let people buy them and play with them. That's what we're doing with AI.
And explain better.
Where AI has the power to destroy people's behavior, to give people, deeply wrong answers to questions that they're gonna,
Done, yeah.
that they're gonna depend on, and then make massive mistakes. If you give AI agents the ability to log into things, access your bank account, and do things in the world, you could make mistakes at computer speed which could do massive damage, and we're giving it away to children.
You think currently AI is an adolescent, and yet we're putting it in the hands of everybody, and so it's going to create much more pain and destruction than productivity, because you think the productivity is way out?
No, AI is an automatic machine gun,
Right.
and we're giving it to children.
That's a pretty negative view of where we're at right now.
What we're doing is so irresponsible. And look, we do this all the time. I mean, throughout history, we've done things. We've killed a lot of people, and eventually, after huge population is dead, we learn our lesson. I mean, we blew up whole cities in World War II, and then we realized maybe we shouldn't nuke people. So we make mistakes, then we learn from them. We're going to suffer, I think, enormous consequences. I don't know the scale of it, and then we'll, please God, if we're still around, we'll learn our lessons.
If we're still around, wow, that's pretty ominous.
I mean, I'm being facetious. We'll be around, but I think that there could be, the scale of the damage could be pretty extreme. Just the scale of the bubble, the financial bubble, I would say that the bubble that exists today is probably a factor of 10 to 50 of what the internet bubble was.
Why do you say that? That's interesting.
Because the internet bubble was startups that inflated like balloons.
Yep.
We have trillion-dollar companies that are becoming $4 trillion companies over AI.
Right.
That level of inflation.
But they're also driving the CapEx spend from cash flow rather than driving it from investment dollars. Like I was here for the dot-com bubble.
Mhm.
It was like VC dollars buying ads and then being recirculated into equity in these companies.
Mhm.
The difference here is that this is free cash flow of mature companies for the most part, funding these things. Although now we're moving into the debt markets to start to fund a lot of this CapEx build out. And by the way, I'm in the camp also that we're in a bubble for what it's worth. And not that I think it matters, but I think we're in a bubble. And we're about to get to the next leg of the bubble, which is the debt markets funding all this CapEx build out.
But the problem is it's monopoly money. It's these like 10 companies giving each other billions of dollars. They're not really, the money you're spending on employees, that's money.
Mm-hmm.
But when NVIDIA, when you buy $10 billion worth of computers from NVIDIA and you invest in NVIDIA, you're basically just paying yourself for equipment. And so you can overpay yourself and it all kind of cancels out.
I know, but that was one specific deal. Like when Meta or is buying NVIDIA chips, or Google's building out their own chips and installing it. We're buying some NVIDIA chips, et cetera. Not all the deals look like this, right? In the internet time, I think there were many more of these kind of funky wonky deals, which, it was circular dollars or VC dollars buying ads that bought equity in companies. There's been a couple of these deals.
But right now, inferencing is a huge money loser.
Yes.
And startups are starting and mature businesses are building applications that are basically like using a sledgehammer to tie your shoelaces.
Yes.
I mean, they're like really they're using an incredibly complicated machine to do a very simple thing that you could do with a linear regression model.
Mm-hmm.
You could do with a deterministic algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only able to do that because it's being subsidized.
Yes.
And so if something costs $1 and you can charge $3 for it, you can make a profit. If it's costing the company that's doing the inferencing $10, eventually they have to charge $15.
Is OpenAI going to need a bailout, do you think?
OpenAI isn't a functioning business.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, the business model is so demonstrably a Ponzi scheme that I don't know when it ends. They're now petitioning the government to give them $1 trillion. No, to invest in them. No, they're a national treasure resource that needs to be invested in by all of them. All of the American people need to be taking their tax dollars and putting it in to save America.
Do you want
from
your tax dollars to go there? Do you want your tax dollars to go there?
God, no.
So I want to go back to your point. So on the one hand, this is a generational technology. At least I think it's a generational technology. It's a significant multi-order of magnitude improvement over what we had previously.
For some aspects of the problem.
Exactly, for some aspects of the problem. And I'd also argue that the internet actually didn't start working for people and create whatever it created over the last 20 years, actually until we had the bubble. Meaning the bubble was actually critical in 98, 99, 2000. I lived through it and the crash. In order to lay the fiber, enable people to build the businesses, et cetera. And then we had a 20-year technology explosion, I think it's fair. Where, to use Mark Andreessen's line, software ate a large part of the world and the economy, and that was valuable. So my own view of the bubble today is it's a necessary step. That's a capital market step to lay the infrastructure that creates the AI productivity boom over the next 20 years, or whenever the bubble bursts in 20 years. That's when people actually reap the benefits of the lower cost, because it's all been subsidized, of compute, of bandwidth, of intelligence, or whatever it is. And, I don't think we're either going to get to AGI. I have an argument with my partner here all the time about this.
Yeah.
I think that's way, way, way out there, if ever. I'm actually a giant believer in human beings.
I think Hasidus gives us an insight into why we're never going to have AGI.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about it because of Hasidic thought, but I'm in the same camp. More Maimonidean thought, but we'll get there a different time. When we don't bore a full audience of people about the difference between Hasidic and Maimonidean philosophy. But so this is like a necessary step for us to actually get the giant productivity gains, and people lose a lot of money in these times. I mean, that's what happened in 2000 and another time.
If it were being deployed in the way the internet was deployed, I would say you're right. And if also the starting point of pre-internet was comparable to the starting point pre-Gen AI, but I've been an investor in AI companies, since 2017, and really I invested as an angel investor before that. And AI before transformer models was a pretty accomplished industry. We were solving problems in production, in enterprise environments, and in small businesses and in the world with pre-Gen AI technology. There were aspects of problems we couldn't solve well. The pattern recognition was not at the level that you could achieve on some problems with transformer models, and they were overusing deep learning. There was a lot of things they were doing, but the state of the world, the AI world before Gen AI, before transformer models, and before ChatGPT was close to being really useful. And if we just taken Gen AI and transformer models and looked at what doesn't work well yet, let's fix those problems, I think we'd be in a very different place. But instead what we said was, wow, this thing can do Shakespearean sonnets. I'm going to throw away the deep learning models, throw away linear regressions, throw away the dynamic programming solutions to hard problems, and just throw it into a generative AI model and get an answer. Just become a prompt engineer. And I think throwing away the powerful solutions that were almost successful has set us back a decade.
You're like a computer programmer. Certainly the one area where this is actually making a lot of progress quickly, and we see in our portfolio companies, is computer programming.
I would push back on that.
Okay, go ahead.
So we had a number of companies in our portfolio that said they were starting to use these co-pilot tools for accelerating their software development, and that they were seeing productivity gains, and it was really helping. So there are two main problems with this. One is that they discovered that, actually three problems. One they discovered is that it could write junior level code pretty reliably. It was really bad at architecture.
Yes.
So it couldn't design things. So you could use it as a tool
to generate code,
but you couldn't design software systems within. People were using it to design software systems, and they were ending up with unmanageable architectures that weren't scalable. The second problem is code reuse and code maintenance. That if everyone in your company is using AI to generate code, you're not going to have the responsible coding practices that you typically have for human coders to be able to read and understand code. So if you have an algorithm that's used 14 times in your company, Gen AI is not going to find the library that you've written once. They're going to write 14 versions of it, and they're probably not going to be the same. They're going to be, whatever mood the LLM is in at the time is going to, or how the prompt is given to them, they're going to come up with a different algorithm, and then you're going to be maintaining 14 pieces of code that do the same thing.
I assume there's some architect that sits on top of this and there's a human being architect that sits on top.
You're giving these the teams deploying this a lot of credit. There are a lot of people who are just throwing this out at teams of programmers and saying, use this, and we're firing half of you. And
so you don't like your companies using co-pilots or
no? So they found out that they thought they were saving time, but after a few months, they realized that what they were getting was unmanageable enough that they had to go and redo it.
Interesting.
So they ended up losing time, and because they thought they were where they weren't. They actually couldn't satisfy some of their customers' demands because they thought they had a problem solved. Then they had to take time out of their work schedule to redo what they thought they'd done, which meant they missed deadlines. But there's a third problem, which I think is really important, which goes across the board to all AI use, which is that whether it's in financial environments, whether it's in consulting, real estate, the best we can hope for, I think, from these tools is replacing junior level work.
Yep.
And the way that you get senior people, the way that you get your senior management team and your mid-level management and the people that you promote
is via being a junior.
Is by having a bunch of people be junior.
Yeah.
And then you figure out which ones are learning the field well enough to be qualified to be the next level. What we're going to find in the next 2 years is we're going to find the best prompt engineers. I'm pretty sure the best prompt engineers are not the best managers of whatever area that you're in. And I think people are going to find out that the promotion, the mentorship, the ability to create a mature workforce is going to be severely stunted by the use of AI.
Yeah, I agree with that. My friend Josh Wolf at Lux has a similar view, I think, to yours. My own view is a little more bullish than that, but I basically agree with your thesis. Is we're going to have like a hollowed out generation, which doesn't get to be the next level.
I will admit that I am a hardcore programmer, and I'm deeply offended by the idea that. So I'm biased. I understand. I have to my partner has to take what I say sometimes with a grain of salt because I am very much a snob when it comes to coding, and I still think I'm right, but. Probably if I was wrong, I might still say the same thing.
You have high conviction, like you said about Jim Simons. It may be a problem with the math. But so if this was going to go right, tell me what going right means in the world of AI.
Going right.
You have a like a negative-ish view. Mm-hmm. Okay, give me the opposite view. Steelman the opposite view for me.
One thing I learned at Renaissance, and even going back to my natural language days, is that the driving force here is data.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just data, it's information. If you had a trillion ones, you have one bit of information, maybe two if you know that's a trillion. But if you have 1 million characters of information that inside of it has, the secrets to the meaning of life, you've got information. And so just because you have data doesn't mean you have a solution. And if you have data that has information in it from an information theory perspective, there are dozens of mathematical algorithms and pattern recognition algorithms that can pull that information out and help you reduce uncertainty about the future. So we've become a one-trick pony where everything is just thrown into an LLM. I think success is looking at the data sets that you have, figuring out how much information you have and which information that you have is relevant to solving a real-world problem, and then finding the right tool at the right level of complexity and cost to extract that information. Looking at the stars, you need really, really advanced math and a lot of computing power to track anomalies in space. When you have McDonald's and data from McDonald's and you want to figure out how to price your fries versus your sodas, you probably don't need the power of a trillion parameter large language model to come up with the optimal pricing for things. So I think that the success in AI would be getting to a point where you have a methodology where you look at the problem you're solving, you look at the information and the data you have, and you find the right level of complexity of analysis to solve that problem well.
What do you think of Meta and Google throwing tens of millions of dollars and more at some of these super high-end AI researchers?
I think that it's necessary. It's not about the person; it's about the stock price, and that if Meta doesn't steal someone from OpenAI, then people are going to question whether they're competitive in the AI space. But if they find someone that they tell the world is worth $125 million, they must be building a world-class AI team that's going to generate AGIs.
Smoke and mirrors at $125 million a mirror.
But the question I ask is, if you got a guy who's like a really brilliant 40-year-old accomplished, like you have someone that's like just really done an incredible amount of work for the last 15 years at Meta, and he's maybe topping out, like, let's pretend he's making $1.5 million, which he's not. But let's say he is. Maybe with stock options, he's making, that kind of low seven figures. How does he feel when this 24-year-old kid who hasn't done a thing in his life, but get good scores in college, and solve one problem at one company, he's making 10 to 100 times what I'm making.
What does a guy who comes with a great degree and spends 5 years of experience comes to Renaissance make, or what would he have made?
I don't know, because I've been out of there for a while.
Yeah.
I'm really sure what the
But it's probably pretty high, right?
Yeah,
It's a lot of money.
But
for doing something you thought was worthless, by the way. But
no, but you only make that money if you make the
money.
If you actually solve real problems.
So here too, you make money in the stock price, so I should pay him the money.
Right, but it could be anybody. It's not him. It's the fact that they're doing it.
You got it.
There are 30 people that they could steal from 5 different companies, and it doesn't matter which one you do, and it doesn't matter if he does anything ever.
Right. It's not the performance actually of the portfolio; it's more the perception in your view.
I think it's a smart move. I think the hard part is managing the social dynamics.
Yeah,
that you have to figure out how to handle that person being productive, being a part of a team when he's suddenly been handed a Lamborghini and everyone's driving Corollas.
Why did you become an angel investor after leaving the hedge fund world?
I started being an angel investor when I was in the hedge fund world. And I have the proud accomplishment that every single company I invested in went to zero.
You have to lose money in this business to learn.
What I learned a lot of lessons of each company. I lost money and I learned a lot of lessons. The money I was investing was, I hate to say it this way, but it was de minimis.
Yeah.
I just was making so much money doing my job that I could, before I was giving tzedakah, before I was giving charity, I was just, having fun burning money in companies. But I'm the reason they failed, because by giving them money irresponsibly and not overseeing it, I made them fat and lazy. And when they came to me pretending like but for this mistake, they would have succeeded and they just need another $100,000, I would keep giving it to them, feeding, giving them the drug and not really solving the problem. And I eventually realized that I was the single point of failure. I was the reason why these companies were failing, because if they took money from you, they would have had oversight, a taskmaster, quarterly check-ins, budget meetings. You would have found the inefficiencies. You wouldn't have given them money unless they reached the metrics. I was an irresponsible investor, but also I invested in science experiments. I love the science, and this is why when I left Renaissance, or when I was kicked out, and I realized that I had a lot to offer the venture community doing work in AI and data science, because I knew a lot that they didn't know. I looked around and realized I needed a partner. I understood that my experience as an investor was completely irrelevant. Writing code for a quantitative hedge fund has absolutely nothing to do with investing in startups. I had domain knowledge that very few people in the world had at the time, and probably still have some edge in that area. I needed to find someone who had as much of an edge in business modeling, identifying good founders, the human side of investing in startups. And so I happened to be in Israel checking out Startup Nation, and I was meeting with different VCs and lawyers, and one of the lawyers that I was meeting with said, by the way, you really should join or start a firm. By the way, I'm doing the first deal for this new fund that just started up. It's a partner that's looking for a domain expert, a scientist, to join his team. He's a real experienced venture investor. But by the way, he's not in Israel. He's in New York. So I went halfway around the world to Israel to meet my partner, who's now, still to this day, still my partner, who was working.
All good things happen in Israel, though.
It was amazing. It was meant to be.
So, it says Differential Ventures, which is, I think, the name of your firm, focuses on ethical, sustainable uses of data. I'm curious about two things. One is, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing is, do you think that has anything to do with either your experience at Renaissance or your religious journey?
So what it means is that there are a lot of really profitable ways of using data in industry and enterprise environments that takes data that has no relationship to human beings, or that does no harm to human beings by using it. And you can help companies make better decisions in their workflows by using data from the world and from their companies to solve problems. You could also take human behavioral data, their location, aligning it with their ethnicity and their financial situation, their family structure, and you can make even more money convincing people to do things that are against their interests to profit the mothership. And I think that's what social media has done. That's what corporate America has done, that they are modeling people in a way against their interests to look. Renaissance makes money off of human psychology. We know that people are going to overbuy something based on some phenomenon, and we buy it ahead of them, and then we sell it when it's hit where, we think. Now, we're not causing them to do it,
Yeah.
but we're taking advantage of their mistakes.
Their proclivities.
Social media and current technology companies are causing the mistakes.
Mhm.
They're goading people into doing things that are against their interests, knowing they'll profit from them.
Mhm.
And I think that is an unethical use of data. So we see those companies. We could probably make our investors more money if we invested in them. We choose not to because as from a religious perspective, I think that doing something that harms the world, I don't think God will let you succeed. So
There's plenty of people who made a lot of money doing it, so they were successful.
they were successful.
There are plenty of people, you just said social media companies you think are doing bad things. Mark Zuckerberg's been incredibly successful.
If you look at the state of democracy in the world today, you can't possibly say he's been successful.
Well, that's a macro, right? I think this comes to the question of success, right? Which is that on an individual level, the guy who invented, or he didn't invent, actually, he was a latecomer. He followed, MySpace and Friendster and a bunch of others. Perfected social media, which you think has caused a lot of damage, has made a lot of money and had a huge amount of impact on the world, positive or negative. On a macro level, democracy, to your point, I think also, I wrote this in my most recent book, is super challenged by this social media. And, the internet and AI has also become used by autocracies to kind of put their thumb on humans. But the question is how you define success. Is it Zuck's success as an example, or is it society's success, which is where I think you're headed? So,
well, but I think also the individual success. If you had 5 times as much money, would you be better, happier? Would your kids be better off? Would you be more of a success as a human being if you had 5 times as much money?
do you think Mark Zuckerberg thinks he's a big success?
I think he has convinced himself he's a big success.
But you don't think he is?
I don't know how he's raising his children.
Yeah,
I don't know what morals he's passing on to his family. I don't know how he views his purpose in life, how he's serving God, how he's serving humanity, and what he's passing on to his kids. When I reached the pinnacle of success, what I thought at Renaissance in 2004, I had 2 young kids, and I realized at some point they were going to ask me some form of the question, what's the meaning of life? And I realized that based on the way I was living, the only answer I could give them with a straight face was whoever dies with the most toys wins, because that's the life I was leading. Everything was about succeeding and making money and making higher salary, bigger bonus. And when I realized that wasn't who I was. But then I didn't know who I was. And that's when I started on my Torah journey to learn that that's not the meaning of life. That's not why we're here. And I had to figure out what is, in the end, I realized I needed to figure out what God wants from me. But I wanted to be able to pass on something to my children that would give them an accurate meaning in life. I could have given them the meaning of life of whoever dies with the most toys wins, and they could have been really good at that maybe. But that's not the right answer. And so is Mark Zuckerberg giving his children the right upbringing, the right message to make them successful human beings? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. I haven't seen Mark in about 15 years.
But 50 billion or 20 billion or 500 million, I don't think that has an iota to do with being a successful human. I think that in many ways, I think it gets in the way of it.
Has your study of Torah actually impacted your investment decisions and which companies you invest in?
It's put my investing in a perspective.
Explain.
So I've been a little bit upset especially the last 2 years about the calling Israel the startup nation.
I'm with you.
Israel is Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, is the steward. If you ever read Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, the steward of Gondor was not the king. He was the family put in the place to be the placeholder until the king came. And then Gandalf came and a lot of bad things happened. But Medinat Yisrael is the steward of Eretz Yisrael. But this is
The
the
land
whole,
of Israel, yeah.
this is the holy land that God gave us, promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Joshua conquered it. The Jewish people lived here. We built the temple where the Shekhinah, God's presence was here. And our purpose in being here, as opposed to being in Uganda or Canada, is that we are here to preserve this land. In the time we live in now, money is a big source of power. So I think our success as Startup Nation, how we keep creating these multi-billion-dollar companies, is a mechanism God is using to make us relevant and powerful in the world. It's not why we're here. When I started, I was here on October 7th in Jerusalem, and I flew back on Sunday after the attacks, and I immediately booked a trip back here 6 weeks later because I said, I can't pick up a gun and shoot terrorists, but I have to do something. And I had 6 weeks to figure out what I could do. And I came back. I was probably here every week, every month and a half throughout the war. And I met with both military people there was a lot of private-public partnerships in supporting military operations. I met with a lot of community leaders, met with hospitals, met with universities, but I also met with startup founders because I had a job to do. And it was so depressing to meet people who were clearly emotionally affected by the war because they're here. You can't not be affected by what happened on October 7th. But they were also saying, why can't we just stop fighting so we can get back to making money in our businesses? Like, my employees are in reserves. They're fighting. I need them to come back and finish our projects so we can be competitive. We're going to run out of money. And it just broke my heart to hear Startup Nation founders and VCs thinking that we are here in Eretz Yisrael, we're here in the land of Israel to be Startup Nation. We had to take a break from that secondary role to fulfill our primary role, which is to create a safe home for the Jewish people, to make the land holy, and to eventually bring back not the steward but the king, and bring Mashiach. And the idea that there were these really cynical people who I just felt were here for the wrong reasons.
But is that easier for you to say at age 57 after a long career at Renaissance and investing your own money for a long time? You're in a different spot than these younger people who are doing this. My kids were in Gaza for and in-law kids were in Gaza for a lot.
I know.
A lot of days.
Yeah, my friends' kids were there. I prayed for them every day. My daughter made Aliyah in February.
Yeah.
She's starting Bar Ilan.
But you look at someone who's like 30 years old, spent 10 years in the military, as the case may be, and he's starting his company. He's getting started. I'm not suggesting, look, no one stood up and said, don't go to reserve duty or have a country to defend. Is it easier for you to say that to them, given where you are at in life?
Oh, I didn't say it to them, and I don't blame them for thinking it. I just think that I think that it's a byproduct. It's a direct consequence of us mismessaging the value of Israel. And I think I don't blame them. I totally got it. My heart broke. I wasn't angry at them.
Yeah.
I was heartbroken because I feel like we're making a mistake by thinking that we are so successful in startups because we're really that great. It's God. And we've seen it in the war with Iran. We've seen it in Iron Dome and the missile defenses. We've seen it in the tunnels. And I have friends who've been kind of like almost live blogging their service, where they have WhatsApp channels where they're sharing their experiences. And
it's not a great idea.
No, but they're sharing that God is with them. That these secular soldiers are seeing miracles, revealed miracles in their battles. And I just think that we are mismessaging the strength of Israel and the power of Israel when Moshe Rabbeinu lifted his arm up.
Yeah.
When Moses lifted his arm up and we won battles, and when his arm got weaker and it went down and we lost, that wasn't because the muscles in his arm were causing us to win. It was the mechanism of God giving this power to the Jewish people. We're experiencing revealed miracles today, and I feel like the messaging we've been giving the last 10 years about why Israel is successful is misleading people into thinking that we have to get back to starting billion-dollar companies, otherwise we're going to lose our edge in the world. We have to stay united as a people. God is rewarding us for our unity as much as he was punishing us, pre-October 7th for our disunity. And I think that we need to be recognizing that by staying united, by working together, by loving each other, finding ways to relate to each other when we're very different, but by figuring out what God wants us to do to protect the land, that is going to make everything else we do successful.
I hate to ask you one last question. So you started a foundation called Semach David, which for translation means the growth or
The seeds of
the
David.
seeds of David.
It's basically Mashiach.
Yeah, I got it. Messiah. And so, and you're focused on education. And I know you've been pretty outspoken about what's going on in American universities over the last 2 years. And I just love to hear, as kind of our last question, kind of what's your view of not just American universities, but actually what you're trying to accomplish through this for the future of education for Jewish people and here in Israel and maybe impact on the world.
Right. So before October 7th, I was working on education in Israel for a few years because we found that Anglo-Americans who made Aliyah, who came to Israel to live, had a lot of trouble integrating into the school systems,
Yep.
especially the religious Zionist community that was trying to learn Torah while they were trying to learn secular studies. And the schools were not well equipped to handle people who didn't speak Hebrew well and parents who didn't speak Hebrew well. And so I hired someone to run my foundation to try to figure out what do these schools need, what's causing the problem, and what can we do to help them fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't fix it by creating American Jewish day schools in Israel.
Right.
It's the last thing we need. We just need to find out what resources do these schools need to understand and staff the teams to be able to do a better job dealing with Americans when they come over and helping them integrate. And so that was the mission, the sole mission until October 7th. And then when I got involved with the controversy at University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater, and became known for these issues of the universities, the first 3 trips I came back to Israel after October 7th, I went to universities. I went to Hebrew University, I went to Tel Aviv, I went to Technion, and I said, what do you need to do a better job of integrating Americans into your schools? And the first thing they said was, we have this English language program. I said, no, that's helping people come to Israel, study, live here for 3 or 4 years, and then not speak Hebrew and then eventually go back to America or maybe go to Renana. But I have a lot of friends in Renana, so nothing wrong with that. But what I wanted to know is how are you going to help young adults come to Israel and graduate as Israelis and then get married and have kids who are Israelis? And we came up with a plan to have a mechina program, like a transition program where
Preparatory program.
the first year they study their major in English, introductory classes, very easy for them to do, and you do an intense ulpan, learn Hebrew, and the more you need to learn, the more intense it is. So, for instance, my daughter, I hope she doesn't mind me saying it, she did 13 years of Jewish day school. She was in honors Hebrew, and she tracked into the second lowest level of ulpan. So the American Jewish day schools they're failing at teaching their students Hebrew. So she's now studying 5 days a week, 3 or 4 hours a day, intensely learning Hebrew while she's starting her college at Bar-Ilan University. And the hope is that at the end of the first year, she will have learned enough Hebrew that she can then finish the last 2 years of her education in Hebrew, graduate fluent in Hebrew in her field of study, and then she can go on to get a master's degree or go practice her career. But the idea is, I don't want us to say, be afraid of Harvard, be afraid of NYU. It's scary in America. Mamdani, be afraid, run away to Israel. I want to look at Israel and say 2 things. Israel is a gem. It's a diamond. Let's polish it. Let's take the beauty of Israel, the strength of Israel, and shine it up in a way that the world and Americans can see how beautiful what it already is. And also, let's look at the problems. Let's find the things that Israel wants to fix about itself, that if you fix them, more Americans would feel comfortable here. Let's fix those things also. And if you can do those 2 things, if you look at what's going on in America today as a Jew, I think as a human being, but let's just start with Jews. If you look at what's going on in America as a Jew, and you look at what Israel is with an honest lens, if you don't choose Israel, stay. Don't come. I mean, I want them to come, but
They should choose Israel.
But if we're not doing a good enough job showing what Israel is, that's on us. But if we're showing them what it is, and they're too American, too infected with the cancer of America to come, then let them. That's my new mantra: is let them.
And so when are you coming?
So this is a question people ask me all the time. My wife I have to say, let them to my wife. She does not understand. She doesn't see things the way I do. But my goal is that I want all my grandchildren to be born in Israel. So my daughter just made Aliyah in February. She came to seminary. She applied, and by February she was finished. All through the war, all through the attacks, going in and out of bomb shelters, she made Aliyah, and then she just started Bar Ilan. My one of my sons is planning on finishing in yeshiva. He was at University of Pennsylvania. He transferred to YU. He wants to start the smicha program, his rabbinic program, and start his master's program. And he wants to move to Israel and finish them here.
Grandchildren is the biggest attraction to bring people to Israel.
And my oldest son, who's very much embedded in New York right now. As soon as his siblings have children, he's going to be on a beeline to it. But I think that
turns out being an uncle also works.
The truth is, I come to Israel I come to Israel for a week every month and a half, and I don't think I'm helping Israel more by being here. I'd be helping myself a lot more. Every 4 amos I walk as a mitzvah. I want to be in Israel, but I love my wife and I want to respect her. When I got married, she was more religious than I was.
Yeah.
So I have to respect that. I pray literally 3 times a day, every day, that she changes her perspective on this. But until she does, I'm going to be living in America. And
next time you come as a couple, have Shabbat at the Eisenbergs.
Okay.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, but that's why I don't live in Israel.
David, thank you so much for doing this. This was super interesting. I mean, super interesting. And I hope people take away also just how much of a journey life is, and to kind of keep staying focused on doing the ethical and moral things as we go forward in life. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
If you like this podcast, please rate us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and do all the other great things that will keep our great content flowing right into your inbox.